On today's show, the Hawks fall to the Chicago Bulls on Saturday evening, blowing a second-half lead of double digits and really running out of gas in the second half of this game, especially in the fourth quarter. We'll get into all of what transpired, what could have been better for the Hawks, what went wrong, et cetera, and we'll get into all of that right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1842 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Rowland, coming to you on a Saturday night now. I guess it'll be Sunday morning by the time you're listening to this podcast, and by the time I finish this podcast, quite frankly, it is very late into the evening on a Saturday into Sunday, and today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app right now, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I also want to encourage you at the top of the show to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you find your podcasts. That includes Spotify and Apple, as well as YouTube. Please like this video as you are watching it, and check us out on both audio and video platforms. Today's show, we'll be diving into what became a 125-113 loss for the Hawks on Saturday as they fall to 4-7 on the season, losing to the Chicago Bulls in interesting fashion. And there's plenty to get to in this game, to be sure. This is a back-to-back with travel for not only myself, but also for the Hawks, as they were in Detroit on Friday evening. Also, their fifth game in 7 days, and that's about as bad as a schedule can get in the NBA in the modern era of the league. They don't really give you worse situations than that across 5 games in 7 days. I mentioned that coming into the night. There's a reason for that. It definitely played a factor in my mind in this game. The Hawks were actually up by as many as 18 points in the first half, as up by 17 points in the third quarter. The Bulls did get within 8 at the end of the third quarter, but the Hawks did go to the fourth quarter with an 8-point lead at home, and then they simply ran out of gas, in my estimation, leading to a 35-15 fourth quarter in favor of Chicago, turning a Hawks 8-point lead into a 12-point loss at the end. Plenty to get to about the game is, for the most part, we'll focus on that. We'll also have an update on DeAndre Hunter later on in the episode. But we'll dive in right now to kind of the big picture takeaways as far as like what actually happened in this game on Saturday. So it was really a two-way loss for the Hawks in some ways. I will lead with this first and just come back to it as well. It was incredibly clear to me what happened in this game, and that the Hawks were the better team through 3 quarters. In the fourth quarter, they had no energy left, and we'll circle back to that in a second. But offensively, we'll start there. It was rough as far as the overall numbers are concerned. A 107 offensive rating in this game. They didn't shoot it well from 3 in this one. 9-29 from the 3-point range. It's not awful, but isn't good either. 31%. They missed 8 free throws in this game as well. They were okay overall from 2, but in a game where they won a lot of the margins, they actually took more free throw attempts than the Bulls. They had fewer turnovers than the Bulls. They had more points in the paint, et cetera, et cetera. The Bulls had the shooting advantage, though, and they shot well free throw line as the Hawks did not. The shot profile, as in where the Hawks were shooting from in this game, was actually quite good. Lots of threes, lots of high-value rim attempts, etc. They were below average in their accuracy around the rim and from floater range, and they also had three-point issues in this game as well. That combination was pretty rough. And look, they were still pretty good overall, and that's a lot of the stats in this game were really skewed by the fourth quarter. It all counts, of course, but in 3 quarters, they were actually pretty good. Then they had a 54 offensive rating in the fourth quarter. I'll share the numbers even more later on in the podcast, but a 54 offensive rating for the quarter. If you don't know what that means that the Hawks only scored 0.54 points per possession in the fourth quarter, which is absolutely dismal. It's about actually worse than half of what a even average offense would score, and that was evident in the fourth quarter. Defensively, they had a 120 defensive rating in the game. That's not very good, including about 130 in the fourth quarter. The big thing was the Bulls shot well from 2-point range, 62% on 2s. Honestly, the Bulls shot the heck out of the ball from mid-range in this game. There were 13 of 21 on 2s that were not at the rim, which is a ridiculously hot number for Chicago. But they also ran very well. We'll come back to that later on. They were pushing the pace in the second half in particular with 23 fast break points overall in the game. And also had some issues with the defensive glass, especially with Capella off the court. They were unable to kind of secure that area of the floor here. But look, I can give you all the numbers that I want to on offense and defense. I have to go back to what I think actually happened in this game. Is that I want to be very clear. The Hawks did not play perfectly well in this game. They did not play a flawless game. It was not just about the situation. It never is. There's always a little bit of everything. Nuance, I know, is not everyone's favorite thing to kind of get into in context, but I'm a big fan of giving you the entire picture on this podcast. But if you watch the fourth quarter, I think it was 5 games in 7 days catching up, especially for a team that's already banged up. So they were playing well through 3 quarters. Quin and Snyder actually flat out said post-game they were gassed, and that was available on film. If you watch the fourth quarter just on its own and pay attention to the body language, et cetera, even more stark in the building, in between timeouts, et cetera, everybody was gassed for the Hawks, and that was very clear. I know I've already seen plenty of this on social media and my mentions, and they're already yelling at me about no excuses and all of that, and that's totally fine. I think that's you're right, obviously, as an observer to not want to hear that. That's okay. I don't blame you for that necessarily. But I think there is an undeniable link. I've covered this league and this team for 14 years at this point, and you can kind of tell when there's a schedule loss afoot in some respects. There are schedule losses in the NBA. If you ask people that cover the league, people that are playing in the league or coaching in the league or being around teams, sometimes you just know. And I'm not sure if it was one of those flatly, but there were a lot of factors going against the Hawks in this game. For one, the Bulls were off yesterday, where the Hawks were playing a road game in Detroit. Then you remember, of course, this again, their 5th game in 7 nights. That's as bad as it gets schedule-wise. The Hawks are also without 4 of their projected top 10 players coming into the season, including 2 of the top 6 guys in Hunter and Bogdanovich. So all that said, like, they also could say, look, if you're a fan, and I saw playing this tonight, I don't blame you for this either. It is undeniable that the Hawks are carrying a dead roster spot right now with Cody Zeller. And they also did not use the mid-level exception this summer, which I railed on over the summer. Also, they are avoiding the tax, very obviously, and they have for several years now. All of that is true at the same time. I've criticized those things. I brought them up repeatedly on the podcast. They are very relevant topics. But when it comes to this game on this night, the Hawks were out of gas, very obviously, and they blew a lead. And yes, blown leads, I've found that nothing triggers fans quite like a blown lead in the second half of the game. And I don't blame you. It's hard to watch. It becomes angsty if you are trying to be rooting your team onto a victory. None of that makes it okay. I'm not saying that the Hawks played well in the second half of this game, because they obviously didn't. But I'm trying to explain to you what I think happened, and that I think it was a combination of the Bulls had a good game plan, which we'll come back to later on. Also, the Hawks missed a bunch of shots that they usually make. And now there's always a debate about like whether that's tied to fatigue or not. It's hard to see and hard to tell that. Like when you miss a layup or miss a 5-footer, is that because you're tired? Maybe, maybe not. But my point is, are you more likely to miss that shot because you're tired? Yes, etc. And I know also the frustration is compounded by the results from earlier in the year. I'm still hearing about the Wizards' losses, and certainly those losses were bad. There's no way around that. But I think especially when it's a back-to-back, and you on Friday you have a terrible start to the game on Friday and you lose. And by the way, I should plug this now. I did a whole episode from Detroit last night about that game, and the Hawks played very well in that game for about 2.5 quarters. But the first quarter and a half, I think the first quarter yesterday on Friday was their worst quarter of the season. I said that yesterday. I stand by that. And I think that is far more worthy of criticism than tonight, to be honest, because they were not worn down last night in the way that they were tonight, et cetera, et cetera. Had to cover both games in person. But look, the Hawks lost a winnable game tonight, and that always stings. They were small favorites at FanDuel, about 2.5 points at FanDuel tonight. So they were not like huge favorites, but still, you were up 17 points in the second half. You're up 8 points going into the fourth quarter. You probably have to win that game. And all of that is kind of put in one stew, and you can kind of grab what you want to out of it. But it is my job, basically, the way that I view things is to try to analyze things rationally as to what happened. The Hawks did blow a lead. The Hawks did not play well in the second half, especially in the fourth quarter. But they also very clearly were gassed, and all of that matters to some degree. But in the end, I can already hear this point being made, and it's not wrong, that the record's all that matters. The results are all that matters in the NBA. It's professional sports. You want to win, obviously. Right now, they're 4-7. Now, the other side of that, and we won't dive into this too much right now, is that even at 4-7, the Hawks are, a game out of fourth place in the Eastern Conference. So, it's not like they're digging a terribly big hole, but they have lost games that they're quote unquote supposed to win, or that they're favored to win. They were extra underdogs last night in Detroit, but I would say just rationally, as I did earlier this week, actually on the podcast about the first 5 games of the season, if you simulated Friday and Saturday 1,000 times, I would tell you the most likely outcome of that back-to-back was a 1-1 record, because the Hawks were slight favorites in one game and they were slight underdogs in the other game. That doesn't always mean you go 1-1, but generally, if you simulate that, you probably go 1-1 more often than not. And the Hawks went 0-2. Same thing that happened with the earlier games. It's Washington, et cetera, et cetera. So they've lost the winnable games. That's always frustrating. But I think it was a combination of poor play, untimely misses, some nice job by the Bulls along the way, and also just running out of gas and being short legs and all those things. And unsatisfying, I know, for listeners, but that's the big picture top line thought for me in this game, is that it was very clearly, to me anyway, from the outside, but also kind of insidery, seeing a team that was just didn't have energy left at the end of the game, and that kind of contributed, at least. At the very least, I would say, hopefully we could agree that that was a contributing factor to what transpired, and it's up to you to decide what you believe as to how much that actually led to this loss for the Hawks. But anyway, a loss, and we'll dive into more of the specifics in a second when it comes to how this game unfolded, top to bottom, my own observations along the way. At the end of the podcast, a Hunter update, as well as my player-by-player evaluations on the podcast. First, though, a word from our partners on the show. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL and NBA action this season with FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, if you're a new customer, you can bet $5 to get $150. That's $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel Sportsbook app is so easy to use. It gives you everything that you actually need to place your bets all in one place. And they have all stuff you're looking for across the sports betting space, from over-unders to point spreads. They have money lines, player props, game props, future bets, same-game parlays, live betting, and so much more. The FanDuel app is safe, it's secure, and they cover the entire range of sports as well. The NBA is focused on this podcast all the time, but they have the NFL there, college football, MLB, WNBA, hockey, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, boxing, MMA, and so much more. And now is an awesome time to sign up with the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. The place to go is FanDuel.com to get started with $150 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com when you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, it seems like it was a long time ago now. The Hawks actually started this game very, very well. It was 8-2 at the outset for Atlanta. Trae threw a perfect touchdown pass, I would say, on an outlet pass to Dyson Daniels to cap that run early on. Defensively, it was some interesting assignments going on. The Bulls played a lot of different combinations on the perimeter. It's always this game of, like, how do you hide Trae Young and who you put Dyson Daniels on, et cetera. I think defensively, for the most part, it went very well. Dyson guarded Josh Giddey heavily in this game, which surprised some fans, but I think that, undeniably, whether I agree with this or not, I think Giddey is the #1 initiator for the Bulls right now as far as usage is concerned, and that kind of led to that. Plus, Trae was having to guard Kobe White because of size restrictions there. So anyway, that happened. Trae had 6 assists in the first 5 minutes of the game. That, of course, is preposterous, and he could have had like 7 or 8 at that point in time. And by the way, he already extended his streak at that point up to 172 games in a row with 5 assists or more. That's the 3rd longest streak in NBA history, and it was rolling on in the first quarter of this one. Clint Capella had 10 points in the first quarter. Notably, there were some rotation tweaks in this game. Part of that was because of the back-to-back, all of that fun stuff. And I do think, along the way, it is worth noting that the Hawks know that Trae is particularly gassed, and they probably have to keep playing him a lot of minutes because they know they can't survive without him. So they changed his rotation in this game. A couple of shorter breaks for him. He still ended up playing a lot of minutes, about 38, because he came back in the fourth quarter and just kind of had to stand there the rest of the way. But they went to a shorter break model, and both Quin and Trae said post-game, like they've been talking constantly the last couple of days, trying to figure out what the best model is for him to play a lot of minutes, but also keep him rested, and they went with that in this game. The bigger, more noticeable change, if you weren't paying close attention, was that Larry Nance was the backup 4 in this game. As I've covered really all year long, the Hawks have been pretty hesitant, and I would say more hesitant than I would have been, to play Nance at the 4, and especially when Hunter has been down, so they've had to play David Roddy at the 4 a lot, and that has not worked, big picture, defensively in particular. And Nance played with a Kongwu. I agree with that. If you're going to use Nance as the 4, it needs to be next to Kongwu. I think Nance and Clint doesn't really work spacing-wise. And it wasn't perfect in this game, but they looked okay in the first half, not as great in the second half. But I think that big picture, my thought is, with respect to David Roddy, I think that if you can get away with not playing him basically right now, even with this limited rotation the Hawks have, I would probably lean to Nance. But neither of them are perfect options at the 4, I have to say. They've missed Hunter. No matter what you think about Hunter, they missed Hunter quite a bit in recent days. And I think that Nance did play here. It was the right decision in my opinion, but he also was not a solution necessarily. Defensively, it wasn't particularly good early. They actually had 16 points on the first 12 possessions, Chicago, in this game. And they had a big run at the end of that because they got some stops at a timely manner. They were up by 13 at the end of the first quarter. They played great defense in the first quarter for the most part, other than that one little hiccup at the start of the game. Trae took one shot in the first quarter and was very obviously the best player on the court. 8 assists, just in total control. Only the 7th time in his career he's had 8 assists in a quarter. And that sounds like a lot, but he's actually played 418 games times 4 quarters. So that kind of tells you how impressive that is, that he's only done this 7 times. Like he's basically the best passer in the league of small guards. So there you go. But the Hawks were really efficient, 11 assists in the quarter as a team, et cetera, et cetera. Roddy did play a couple minutes in the second quarter because Garrett Matthews actually got dinged up a little bit. He was hobbling, and they brought in Roddy for 2 minutes. That was kind of the only time. And I'm convinced that they were not going to play Roddy at all, except for that Garrison was hobbling around in that stretch. They were up by 18 in the third quarter. This happened later on as well. But once they got to 18, the Bulls hit 3 straight threes, like literally in possession by possession by possession, to cut the lead in half in like a minute. Not the best close to any quarters in this game, especially in the second and third. But they did have about a 140 offensive rating in the first half. That's obviously fantastic. The offense did wane a little bit at times, but the defense was really the only issue in the second quarter. They allowed 36 points in the second quarter, including 59% shooting for the Bulls and 5 threes, but they still kind of won on the margins. And opening the second half, they went on a 7-0 run out of the gate to go from up 10 to up 17. They were feeling pretty good. Dyson gets a pick 6. Basically, he drives and sets up Jalen for a corner 3. Clint blocks a shot. Trae finds Ricochet for a cutting layup, and they're up by 17 points. But from that point forward, it was all Bulls to some extent. So the Bulls had a 15-5 run right away, and it seemed intentional to me in the moment. And I said this on Twitter, so you can't say that I'm not. This is not revisionist history. I said this live in the moment. It seemed like it was on purpose to me that Chicago injected some life when it came to like burst on the wing early in the third quarter. So they start every game, basically, the trio of Kobe White, Zach LaVine, and Josh Giddey. In this game, they did that in the third quarter. Then, like within 2 minutes, they would change they had kind of a line change and went to like Dalen Terry and Julian Phillips. Later on, Javon Carter. And it seemed to me, again, that it was basically they tried to have those guys push the pace like to a pretty breakneck degree. I was going to know that anyway. And then Quin and Trae both brought it up individually. I actually asked Clint Capella about that after the game. He agreed it was a problem for the Hawks, but that set the tone a little bit. I think the Bulls smartly, under Billy Donovan, probably knew, and almost certainly knew, that the Hawks, I should say, were on the 5th game in 7 days. And it was like, all right, we're down by 10. Let's see if the pace can kind of be pushed here, and we'll wear the Hawks out. And that ended up being effective, to say the least. The Hawks did have a couple of easy dunks during that time period, but the Bulls overall were dictating the flow of the game at that point, despite losing the game. And that ended up being prescient for the future. They had some tough possessions, I should say, at the end of the third quarter. Trae forced a pass, and then he got trapped late, got it to Nance, who just didn't know how much time was left, didn't get a shot up, and that was kind of an ugly end to the third quarter. And the worst stretch of the game, honestly, was the end of the third quarter into the beginning of the fourth quarter. That is where the Hawks lost the game, in my opinion. So they were up by a handful of points, 6-8 at the end of the third. And then that last minute, it did not go well. Then it was a 16-3 overall run by the Bulls over about, 5-ish minutes, 5.5 minutes, to go back to the last minute of the third quarter and the beginning of the fourth quarter. And that lost the Hawks the lead, and they never got it back, essentially, from that point forward. They had 3 points in 5.5 minutes. They were 1 step from the floor with 4 turnovers, a couple of just totally stagnant possessions where just nothing was happening, including one where Nance had to shoot like a terrible fadeaway at the buzzer of the shot clock. Also missed some shots that they usually make. I referenced this earlier, but if you watch this game back, the Hawks had a handful in the fourth quarter of point blank shots, either whether from 5 feet a floater that was open or a layup or whatever. They just missed a lot of those shots. So it was a combination of poor outcomes and poor process. So some bad possessions, some bad misses, et cetera, and all of that was wrapped up in one. Part of that was that Trae sat for a little bit and they just could not function again. If you missed the show yesterday, number one, listen to that show for me. I would very, very much appreciate the support there. Number two, I talked about this a lot, but on Friday, the Hawks were plus 14 with Trae on the court and minus 15 with Trae off the court in 7 minutes. It wasn't quite as bad today as far as the raw numbers, but for 2 days now, and really beyond that, the offense has been basically unable to function without Trae. With respect to Keaton Wallace, who I like quite a bit, he is not a NBA level offensive initiator. That's been very much driven home in the last couple of games. And not, by the way, not all on him by any means, but Trae just can't sit right now, and they know it, and they pushed his minutes as a result, but that was evident at that point in time. But to be fair, again, when Trae came back in, he was still gassed and was not good in the fourth quarter. So you win some, you lose some, and you lost one in here. They did get some stops. I thought the door was open briefly in the fourth quarter because the Hawks got like 4 or 5 stops out of 6 possessions. So they were playing good defense for a while mid-quarter, but they simply could not score. So during that stretch when they were actually keeping things afloat defensively, they missed 4 threes in a row. Then it was 2 by Trae, 1 by Jalen, one by Ricochet. They missed 2 free throws by Dyson. Jalen threw 2 terrible passes in like a minute and a half span, and they just kept not being able to score. I mean, that was the end result. Like, the defense was not great in the fourth quarter, but it was the offense. They just could not get points. And once they had some breakdowns as the game got away from them, it was because they were not scoring in bad ways, like bad turnovers, and that was leading to runouts by the Bulls, which is not really your defense's fault. It's more of an offensive issue at that point. They were down 8 with 2:30 to go, and they were 3 of 18 from the field at that point in the fourth quarter. They did finally score. Capella had a layup, but then they gave up a dagger 3, and that was basically the end of that. And here's the money stat. I know I gave it once before, a 54 offensive rating in the fourth quarter, and they scored 15 points on 6 of 16 on twos, 0 of 7 from 3, 3 of 7 at the line, and 5 turnovers. So basically, in about 28 possessions, they scored 15 points. That is horrific. And again, there was a combination of bad process and bad results. There were some good shots in the fourth quarter that didn't go in. 0 of 7 from 3, I think at least 4 or 5 of those were good looks, and they didn't make any of them. Now, obviously, you're not going to make all of them, but if you make one or two of those, maybe the game changes. Same thing around the rim. Floater range shots at the rim just didn't go in, and that in tandem with tired legs and the inability to get back in transition led to poor results. So I won't relitigate that all again right now, but the offense was really, really bad in the fourth quarter, and that was probably the number one catalyst. As long as, to explain it, dealer's choice on that. But offensively, the results were really poor in the fourth quarter, and that was the end of that. And we'll leave it there. Okay, we'll get into more on this game when it comes to the player-by-player evaluations and an update on DeAndre Hunter. But first, though, a word from our partners on the podcast today. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time, and I go to a ton of basketball games, including 2 of the last 2 days. It never gets old to me. The sounds from the court, the buzz in the crowd, it's always fun, and memories are vivid from when I've been at basketball games in my entire life, really, especially in my adult life. But, at Game Time, tickets are available for all kinds of sporting events, including basketball and hockey and baseball, etc. You can buy tickets as well for music, comedy, theater, and more. Also, they have a new feature at Game Time called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets even easier and better for you across the board. At Game Time Picks, they filter out all the stuff that you actually don't need and show you the incredible deals that you actually do want on great seats. There's no time wasted searching for that through all those different tickets that you actually don't want. For example, there are awesome deals right now for the Hawks' first NBA Cup home game on Friday against the Wizards, and that includes a pair of tickets right now that are available for $16 each, including fees on a Friday in Atlanta. Great deal there, and there's more of that happening all the time at Game Time. I love that feature. It's huge. They sort of toggle it on to view the seats through all-in pricing. There are no surprise fees at the checkout screen when you have that toggled. Also, the lowest possible price guaranteed at Game Time. You can take all of the guesswork out of buying tickets with the folks at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account and use that code. It's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? It's Game Time. All right, an update here before I dive into the rest of this game and the fallout there from DeAndre Hunter. So this was Hunter's 9th consecutive missed game. He played the first 2 of the year. He's missed the last 9. I've chronicled this pretty much every day for the last 2+ weeks, including some of the stuff about how the injury report listings are kind of strange for Hunter and have been for a few days now. And the Hawks have not given any updates. Still to this point, they've given 0 updates, either an official release or by Quin Snyder as far as his actual status of his knee, just the injury report at this point in time. But there's a little bit more information today, at least that pertains to the last couple of days for DeAndre Hunter. So Lauren Williams of the AJC, who covers the team there, reported this first, and I can also confirm this after that that Hunter and his partner welcomed a baby girl into the world earlier today on Saturday. So congratulations to them, obviously. The baby arrived about 2 months early, and while both mom and baby are in stable condition, Hunter's been with them the last couple of days. Obviously, there are more important things in life than basketball. This is one of those things, and that should be very, very clear to anyone sort of on the outside here. But on the basketball side, I am told he is medically cleared from the knee issue. That's what I was told today, medically cleared. Now, that's not definitive on when he's going to actually play again, but it could be as early as Tuesday in theory, from what I was told. Maybe Friday will be the next game after that. Hawks only had that one game on Tuesday between now and Friday. So if he doesn't go to Boston, it might be Friday at home against Washington. But just to say this out loud, the Hawks have still not said anything about what the actual knee issue is or was for Hunter. They called it inflammation at the beginning and then changed it to injury management well before this. So the injury management listing is still weird. It still does not tell us anything about what's going on there. That's normally a listing that you see for back-to-backs. And then when they're not back-to-backs, like it's kind of a weird eyebrow-raising listing. So maybe his knee is totally fine now. I would like to know that. We just don't. It does explain the last 4 days or so. So on Wednesday, he was listed as questionable for the game. That was the only time in the last week plus that he's been listed as questionable. He was listed as questionable. He did not play. And then from that point forward, he was out on Friday, didn't travel to Detroit, and then was not around today. That is explainable by the fact that what I just told you about his partner having a baby, et cetera, et cetera. Before that, though, there were several games where he was questionable at the beginning, then it became out again, and they changed the listing to management. That has not been answered for. I don't know if it ever will be, but we'll see on that. But anyway, maybe we'll come back in a few days. He'll be fine with the knee. We'll see on that. That is the latest there. That's all I know right now. And I, again, certainly want to send my best wishes to Trae and his family. That's the most important thing by a wide margin here. But at the same time, if you're a Hawks fan, we don't really know about the knee other than, again, I was told very clearly today that he has been medically cleared from the knee issue. So we'll see if he comes back on Tuesday. Could be Friday. But he would help a lot. I know I said this earlier briefly. I won't go down that rabbit hole too much right now, but he is going to help them. He's not a perfect player by any means, but just depth-wise, he's a starting caliber forward, and they could use more of that right now. All right, so the guys who actually played in this game, 10 guys have played, but Roddy did not really factor in the rotation. He played 2 minutes, -5, by the way, in his minutes. Defensively, it was a barrage when he came in the game, as it has been most of the year. Speaking of Roddy, Larry Nance Jr. took a spot in the rotation. Nance played 14 minutes. They were -1 of those minutes, 6 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists. I think that Nance, as the 4, is not going to be as impactful. So I've said this before, but if you're a new listener, Nance is, for me, more of a 5 than a 4. He can play the 4, but in the modern NBA, in his current state, I think he's more of a 5. So at the 4, offensively, he's not special. At the 5, he gets to be really interesting as an offensive player with his passing and his shooting. At the 4, he's not really moving the needle. He can play there. And right now, again, for me, the only bar he has to clear to play right now at the 4 is being better than Roddy. And I think he does. I think he is that. But you saw some clunkiness there. And I think defensively, Nance has not been great this year. It was more it stood out more to me last night when I pointed out kind of painstakingly that while he had an awesome offensive game in Detroit, they didn't even win his minutes because the defense was so bad with him and Roddy on the court together. Tonight, it was kind of clunky on offense. And then defensively, it wasn't great either. You think you'd be really good defensively with Nance and Okongwu, but it wasn't the case. So anyway, he was fine individually, but not like a savior necessarily, just kind of what they have right now. Okongwu was not very good, I didn't think. 8 points, 7 rebounds, did have an assist as well, but -10 in his minutes. He missed a couple of bunnies around the rim, a couple of breakdowns for Onyeka. Not his best weekend, honestly. He was not very good on Friday either. So he'll have better nights. He'll have, I'm sure, but he's not like blowing anybody away right now. That's always a topic that I will entertain every once in a while about him and Capella and Nance and all that stuff. Congo was not forcing himself on the floor, and that was the case in this game. Garrison was fine in this game, 8 points. He actually was +4. He's the only guy with a plus-minus in the positive in this game. Didn't do much besides shooting, but that was fine. Keaton Wallace, 4 points, 2 assists, had a block defensively. It was a pretty impressive block. But 0-2 on 2. It was 0-2 on threes, 2 of 3 on 2s. And I thought he was fine, but again, offensively initiating things is not his best bet right now. To the starters in this game, Ricochet had a weird one, 17 points, 2 rebounds and no assists. He was 5 of 8 on 2s, but only 1 of 6 from 3. Missed 2 free throws. He was not great. Only played 30 minutes. I mean, he was okay, but just didn't do like a lot of like the little things that he's been doing to help. He did make some shots that were big in the second half. Capella was their best center by far in this one. 20 points, 9 rebounds, had a block and an assist in this game. Did Clint. He was 8 of 14 from the floor and 4 of 4 from the free throw line. He was good. He was not like incredible, but he was really good last night too. So it's been not last night, really good on Wednesday night. So 2 of the last 3 games have been really good. And I think he's playing good basketball. He was actually -2 in the game, in a game they lost by 12 points. So there's that. Jalen Johnson, interesting game. 20 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, a steal and a block for Jalen. He actually, I think, made his first 5 shots and was 1 of 6 from the floor after that. He was red hot early on. Still very efficient. 20 points on 14 shooting possessions is really good. Defensively, kind of hit and miss. I thought he was fine, but he made some rough decisions late in the game. I think he had 2 turnovers in the fourth quarter. And both of which led to runouts. Dyson Daniels was good in this one. 16 points, 6 steals, again for Dyson, 8 rebounds, and 3 assists. He has been unbelievable defensively. Like, I don't want to overstate it, and I don't think I am. I think he's been probably the best perimeter defender in the NBA this season. He is comfortably leading the league in deflections and steals right now, and that is not everything. But when you combine his ability to do that, plus be solid as a defender on the ball and game change that way, he's been incredible there. Offensively, he was just okay in this game. 16 points on 16 shots, basically. 3 assists is fine. 8 rebounds is actually very, very solid, but he missed all 3 of his threes. Look, you'll take it all day long from Dyson. He was really good in this game, I thought. And then Trae had a weird one. Like, in the first half, he was pretty much brilliant despite not scoring a ton. Second half, 14. Still ended up with 14 points, 16 assists. 16 assists is not something you could just like wave away, but he was only 4 of 10 on 2s and did not take a free throw in this game, which is very odd for him. He looked to be gassed to me, especially in the fourth quarter. Like, they all were, but I think especially Trae and the workload he's carrying. Right now, this is a money stat. And part of this is that the Hawks have played 11 games, and that's the most in the league. Not by themselves, but that's one of the most in the league. But Trae and Jalen are currently number 1 and number 2 in minutes played so far, and they're both over 400 for the season. Number 3 on the list is Kay Cunningham at like 360. So they are comfortably playing the most minutes in the league so far. And that is catching up to them, I think, at this point in time. Now, it's double-edged sword with Trae in particular, where like it has been pretty much proven, yes, in a small sample size, but I think pretty clearly that they cannot hold up without him. And they all know it, including Trae, including Quin. They know it, but you have to try to manage that compared to like the season, basically. And just to remind everybody one more time, because people keep forgetting this almost, not only are they without their projected backup point guard coming into the year in Bufkin, but Krejci was their 3rd option there. And Bogey is their number 3 shot creator behind Trae and Jalen. All 3 of those guys being out at the same time is what has led to what they are now. And it is fair to bring up, and I did it this summer too, that they were a little bit uncertain behind Trae as far as second unit offense was concerned. I flagged that multiple times. It was the case. But what you can't do is ignore the fact that they are down 3 of their top 5 guards right now. That's important context. But it is also undeniable that they're not able to function right now without Trae. So I don't know what you do about it. In the meantime, other than just pray that guys return. And also, again, they could, if they were not worried about money, they could cut Cody Zeller right now and sign a guard. Would that player help them? I don't really know because there's not really guys that are available, but it's a problem right now, and it's been a problem for a little while. All right, that's all I have on this particular game. The Hawks are now off from now until Tuesday. This is the first time this season that they've had more than one day off between games. I'm saying that with purpose. They have not had a single time this year where they have more than one day off. Now they have two days off before the game on Tuesday. Then they have 2 days off after that when they play the Wizards. Unfortunately, their 2-day break, they're not going to have anybody back other than maybe Hunter, and then they play the most difficult matchup in the league. Boston on the road is the worst spot in the league. Maybe you could argue OKC on the road. That's fine. But regardless, it's a bad spot. It's also the first NBA Cup game. And if the Hawks lose there, they're not dead in the NBA Cup, but they don't want to get blown out at the very least. So that's something we'll cover later on in the week. But that's the next game on the agenda. I am planning to do at least one episode between now and the game on Tuesday. It probably won't come until Monday sometime, Monday evening probably, because nothing will change. The Hawks are off on Sunday, probably. At least they're supposed to be off on Sunday in full. So TBD on that. But The best thing you can do to support the show is, of course, to subscribe and download and click, etc., on the podcast on your favorite platforms across the board. We are on Apple. We're on Spotify. We're on YouTube. Please like the video as you are watching it on that platform. Also support our sponsors, of course, and then also follow the show on Twitter/X at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland. Also follow me on Blue Sky if you want to at BT Rowland, and my non-podcast work, extra audio, written words, chats, etc., is patreon.com/BT Rowland. I appreciate everybody listening to the podcast. Sorry for the late delivery. I sat in traffic for like an hour after this game, after a long night and a long weekend, but hopefully this podcast gets to you on Sunday into Monday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend if you listen to this podcast on Sunday. If not, enjoy the rest of the week if you listen to this podcast on Monday and beyond. I'll have more content between now and Tuesday, so stay tuned. Subscribe to the podcast. We'll see you all next time.